My name is Olive Fulton. My family thinks I'm a spinster counting underwear in an army depot. But the truth is, I just got back from 72 hours in the Syrian mud hunting a terrorist leader. Yet tonight, at Thanksgiving, my brother Jackson, who never served a day, patted my shoulder. Hey Olive, I got a new Glock. Want to go shooting? I'll teach you not to shoot your foot. You probably forgot the smell of gunpowder counting socks. He winked at his buddies. He has no idea this logistics girl is one of SOCOM's deadliest snipers. So I decided I'm accepting that invite. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you want to see his face when I tear a target apart at 500 yards. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of my 10-year-old Ford Ranger as I pulled into the driveway. It was 4 p.m. in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and the late November air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and dried leaves. My truck, a reliable beat-up piece of machinery with a rusted bumper and 200,000 miles on the odometer, looked like a toy parked next to the behemoth sitting in front of the garage. It was Jackson's truck, a brand new, lifted Chevy Silverado. It was jet black, polished to a mirror shine, with tires that cost more than my entire wardrobe. We call them pavement princesses on base. Trucks designed to look tough but have never seen a speck of mud. The back window was plastered with stickers, a Punisher skull, a Don't Tread on Me snake, and a thin blue line flag. It was the starter pack for a middle-aged man trying desperately to look dangerous. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. Just 48 hours ago, my hands were wrapped around the pistol grip of a suppressed MK-27 rifle, waiting in a cold, wet hide site near the Euphrates River. Now, I had to transform. I reached into the back seat and grabbed my tactical go bag. It was a heavy, battered rucksack stained with oil, sweat, and the red dust of 3 different continents. I opened the trunk of my car, the only place safe from prying eyes, and shoved the bag deep into the shadows, covering it with a blanket. In its place, I pulled out a beige, sensible leather purse I bought at TJ Maxx specifically for days like this. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked hollow. There was a thin, healing scratch along my jawline from a piece of shrapnel that had flown a little too close last week. I applied a thick layer of concealer over it, smoothing it out until the warrior vanished and the supply clerk appeared. I took a deep breath, inhaling the silence before stepping out into the war zone I feared most. My mother's kitchen. The house smelled like roasted turkey, sage stuffing, and judgment. "Olive, you're finally here," my mother, Margaret, called out from the kitchen without turning around. She was wiping down the granite countertops, her hair perfectly coiffed. "We were about to start without you. Did you get held up at the warehouse again? Counting inventory takes all day on a holiday." "Traffic was bad on Skibo Road, Mom," I said, my voice quiet. I walked over to kiss her cheek, but she was already moving away to check the oven. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," Jackson boomed from the living room. He walked in, holding a Bud Light. At 46, Jackson was heavy-set, his gut straining against a tight, olive-green t-shirt. Emblazoned across the chest in bold Greek letters was the phrase Molin Lob. "Come and take them." It was the battle cry of King Leonidas at Thermopylae. Seeing it stretched across the stomach of a man who got winded walking up the driveway made my stomach turn. "Hey, Jackson," I said, forcing a smile. "You look tired, Ollie," he said, looking me up and down. He shook his head. "And look at those boots. Do you ever wear heels? You walk like a man." "Comfort over style," I replied, moving past him to the dining table, where my younger sister, Blanca, was already seated. Blanca was the golden child. She was 30, glowing, and dressed in a tailored dress that probably cost half my paycheck. She had just been promoted to marketing director at a tech firm in Raleigh. "Olive," Blanca beamed, flashing a diamond engagement ring. "Mom told you about the promotion, right? We're thinking of buying a vacation home in the Outer Banks next year." "That's great, Blanca," I said, genuinely happy for her, though I knew what was coming next. "See, Olive." Mom set the turkey platter down with a heavy thud. "Blanca is building a future. She's not running around in dusty warehouses counting combat boots and underwear for Uncle Sam." When are you going to get out, honey? You're 32. You're not getting any younger, and frankly, that job makes you look hard. I stared at the mashed potatoes. The benefits are good, Mom. And the pension? Pension, Jackson snorted, taking a swig of beer. The military is a joke these days. It's all soft. They're worried about feelings, not fighting. Back in the day, it was about toughness. Now? I bet half the guys on Bragg couldn't handle a real firefight. I cut a piece of turkey, my knife scraping against the china. If only you knew, I thought. If only you knew that the soft guy I work with, Miguel, carried a wounded teammate 2 miles uphill while taking fire last month. But I said nothing. I just chewed, swallowing the meat along with my pride. This was the deal I made. To protect them from the worry, to protect my mother's fragile heart, I had to be the disappointment. I had to be the clerk. Speaking of fighting, Jackson leaned forward, his eyes lighting up with that fake intensity he loved to project. I joined that new tactical gun club out on Highway 87. You know, the one with the dynamic ranges. That sounds fun, I said flatly. Fun? It's serious business, Olive, he corrected me, pointing a fork in my face. I just picked up a custom Glock 19 with a holographic sight and a match-grade barrel. Cost me $2,000. I've been watching a lot of tactical training videos online. You have to be ready, you know? The world is getting dangerous. I took a sip of water to hide the smirk threatening to break through. Jackson was lecturing me about danger while sitting in a climate-controlled suburban dining room. Anyway, Jackson continued, looking around the table to ensure he had an audience. I was thinking, since you're around supplies all day, you probably haven't smelled gunpowder in years. Why don't you come out with me and the boys this Saturday? The table went quiet. Mom looked at me with pity. Blanca looked amused. Oh, Jackson, don't tease her, Mom said. Olive doesn't like guns. They're too loud. No, I'm serious. Jackson grinned, a predatory, condescending grin. He reached out and patted my shoulder, a heavy, patronizing thud. I'll teach you, Ollie. I'll show you how to hold it so the recoil doesn't smack you in the face. I promise I won't let you shoot your own foot off. It'll be good for you to see what real men do. My hand, resting on my lap under the tablecloth, clenched into a fist so tight my nails dug into the palm. The silent, professional creed of the Special Forces screamed in my head. Quiet, humble, lethal. But looking at him, at that ridiculous t-shirt, at the arrogance dripping off his chin like gravy, something inside me snapped. Not a loud snap, but a quiet, dangerous click. Like a safety being disengaged. He wanted to teach me. He wanted to show me what a real man does with a weapon. I looked up, locking eyes with him. I let my expression soften into the mask of the submissive, clueless little sister. You know what, Jackson? I said, my voice steady. That sounds wonderful. I'd love to see your new toy. I probably am a bit rusty. Jackson laughed, looking at Blanca and winking. Bring earplugs, sweetie. It's gonna get loud. I will, I whispered, picking up my fork again. I definitely will. Under the table, my fist relaxed. The weekend couldn't come fast enough. I didn't sleep that night. I rarely do after a deployment. The silence of my one-bedroom apartment off Santa Fe Drive was louder than the mortar fire in Syria. It was 3 a.m., and the adrenaline from the family reunion was still coursing through my veins, mixing poorly with the residual cortisol of combat. I kicked off the sheets, soaked in cold sweat, and walked into the bathroom. The fluorescent light hummed as it flickered on, washing my face in a harsh, clinical glow. I looked like a ghost, dark circles under my eyes, skin pale despite the desert sun I'd lived under for months. I pulled off my oversized t-shirt and stared at the reflection in the mirror. My family saw a logistics clerk who lifted boxes of MREs. The mirror showed a map of violence. There was a jagged pink line running down my left shoulder, a souvenir from a ricochet in Kandahar 3 years ago. On my thigh, a burn scar from an IED that had taken out our lead vehicle in Yemen. And running along my ribs, right over my heart, was the ink that kept me grounded when the world was burning. Psalm 23:4. It wasn't just a Bible verse, it was a job description. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I traced the letters with my finger. My mother would faint if she saw this, not because of the tattoo, though she hated them, but because of what it represented. She thought I sorted inventory lists. She didn't know I was the one walking through the valley so she could sleep soundly in her suburbs. My mind drifted back 10 years. I was 22, fresh out of the Q course, proud and stupid. I had come home for Christmas and made the mistake of telling a story. Just a small one. About a training accident where a flashbang went off too close. I remember the color draining from my mother's face, her hand clutching her chest, the gasping breaths, the ambulance ride. The doctor said it was a stress-induced angina attack. She can't handle stress, Olive, my father had told me before he passed. Keep her safe. So I did. I created the lie, Olive the supply sergeant, Olive the spinster, Olive the failure. It was the best cover story I ever fabricated. It kept her heart beating, even if it broke mine every time she looked at me with that mix of pity and disappointment. I turned away from the mirror and walked into the small living room. It was sparse: a couch, a TV I never watched, and a locked gun safe in the closet. Jackson had made a comment about my apartment once. Must be tight living on a sergeant's salary, huh? Maybe if you got a real job, you could afford some decor. I picked up my phone and logged into my bank account. I didn't do it for vanity. I did it for reassurance. The numbers loaded on the screen. Checking, $2,400. Savings, $485,000. Hazard pay, re-enlistment bonuses, combat pay, special operations stipends. And the fact that I spent 9 months of the year living in a tent where my expenses were zero. I was sitting on nearly $500,000 in cash, not counting my investment portfolio. I could buy Jackson's lifted truck 5 times over and set them on fire just for fun. But I didn't. I lived the gray man lifestyle. Blend in, be unremarkable, don't draw attention. In my world, flashing money or status made you a target. In Jackson's world, it was the only thing that mattered. My eyes fell on the corner of the room. Leaning against the wall was an old paper target from a range day 2 years ago. It was a hostage rescue target, a silhouette of a bad guy holding a good guy. There were 2 holes in the bad guy's head, so close together they looked like a single figure 8. I walked over to it. I remembered that shot. 800 yards, crosswind, moving target. I had taken the breath, held it between heartbeats, and squeezed. I protect this country, I whispered to the empty room. I protect people who don't even know I exist, but in my own house, I'm a joke. The shame washed over me again, hot and suffocating. It wasn't just about Jackson being a jerk. It was about the erasure of my entire existence. To them, the last 10 years of my life, the blood, the sweat, the friends I'd lost, didn't count. It was just counting underwear. I thought about Jackson's invitation, his smug face. I'll teach you not to shoot your foot. Usually I would deflect. I would make an excuse. I would say I had inventory to count. But tonight, looking at that target, something shifted. The stoic wall I had built around myself developed a crack. No, I said, my voice firm in the darkness. I wasn't going to the range to learn. I wasn't going to be the little sister this time. I walked over to the closet and punched the code into my gun safe. The heavy steel door swung open with a smooth hiss. Inside, gleaming under the safe's LED light, was my custom STI 2011 combat pistol. It was a work of art. Machined steel, aggressive stippling, a red dot sight that cost more than Jackson's entire gun collection. I picked it up. It felt heavy, cold, and familiar. It felt like the truth. He wants to see a shooter. I racked the slide, the metal clacking satisfyingly in the quiet room. I'll show him a shooter. It was a dangerous game. Revealing my skills meant risking the cover story. If I shot too well, questions would be asked. But I was tired. I was so tired of being the disappointment. Just for one day, just for 1 hour on that range, I wanted to stop pretending. I wanted to let the wolf out of the cage, just a little bit. I put the gun back and closed the safe. I went back to the window and looked out at the streetlights of Fayetteville. Somewhere out there, Jackson was probably sleeping soundly, dreaming of being the alpha male he pretended to be. He had no idea what was coming. If you've ever had to hide your true self just to keep the peace in your family, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by the people who should know you best? Type yes if you know exactly how that feels. The sun would be up in a few hours. I needed to sleep. I needed to be ready. A Saturday was going to be interesting. 72 hours later, the contrast between my two lives couldn't have been starker. I stood at the head of a conference table inside a secure SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facility, deep within the JSOC compound at Fort Bragg. The air conditioning hummed, keeping the room at a crisp 65 degrees to protect the servers buzzing in the walls. The only light came from the massive monitors displaying high-resolution satellite imagery of a dusty village in northern Yemen. Target package is confirmed, I said, my voice steady and authoritative. I tapped the screen with a laser pointer. Intel suggests HVT movement in Sector 4. We have a 12-hour window before the sandstorm hits. Alpha Team, you're the primary breach element. Bravo, you're on Overwatch. Around the table sat 12 of the most dangerous men on the planet. Operators from Delta Force and the 75th Ranger Regiment. Men with beards, tattooed arms, and eyes that had seen too much. They weren't looking at all of the logistics girl. They were looking at Captain Fulton, their team leader. Copy that, ma'am. Master Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez nodded. He was a mountain of a man, built like a linebacker, with a scar running through his eyebrow. He took a sip from his thermos of Black Rifle coffee, pitch black, strong enough to strip paint. It was the fuel of our trade, unlike the pumpkin spice lattes my sister Blanca posted on Instagram. What about extraction, boss? Another operator asked, leaning forward. Secondary LZ is prepped here. I pointed to a clearing 3 clicks north. If things go south, we have air support on standby. Any questions? The room was silent. A respectful, focused silence. These men trusted me with their lives. They knew I did the work. They knew I checked every detail, every variable, buzz. My personal phone, sitting face down on the table next to my secure terminal, vibrated against the wood. It was a breach of protocol to have it on, but I was expecting a call from the base commander. I glanced down. It wasn't the commander. Jackson. Hey, kiddo. Don't forget to wear sneakers tomorrow. No heels, lol. The recoil on this 9mm is no joke. Don't want you falling over. I stared at the screen. The sheer absurdity of it almost made me laugh out loud. Here I was, planning a kinetic operation that involved millions of dollars in assets and human lives, and my brother was worried about me wearing high heels to a flat range. Miguel, sitting to my right, caught my expression. He leaned over, his eyes flicking to the phone screen. He read the message and snorted, trying to stifle a laugh. Heels, Miguel whispered, his voice low and gravelly. Does he know who he's talking to? Does he know about the shot you made in Syria? 800 meters, moving target, 40-mile-per-hour crosswind, in the mud? He thinks I count socks, Miguel, I whispered back, picking up my phone and sliding it into my pocket. He thinks the loudest noise I hear is a forklift backing up. Unbelievable, Miguel shook his head, taking another swig of his coffee. Civilian logic. It's a disease, boss. Dunning-Kruger effect in full swing. The less they know, the more they think they know. Let him have his moment, I said, turning back to the satellite map. Focus up, gentlemen. Let's get this done so I can go home and get taught how to hold a gun. A ripple of chuckle went through the room. They knew the score. To them, it was the funniest joke of the week. To me, it was just Saturday. By Friday evening, the mission was greenlit and handed off to the night shift. I drove home, the tension of the briefing slowly bleeding away, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. The sun was setting as I walked into my apartment. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't make dinner. I went straight to the closet. The keypad on the gun safe beeped as I punched in the code. Beep, beep, beep. Click. I bypassed the standard issue M9 Beretta on the top shelf. That was a tool for work. For tomorrow, I needed something personal, something that made a statement. I reached for the bottom shelf and pulled out a hard Pelican case. Inside, resting in custom-cut foam, was my pride and joy. A customized Glock 34 Gen 5. It wasn't a stock pistol like the one Jackson bragged about. This was a race gun. The slide had been milled for weight reduction, exposing the gold titanium nitride barrel underneath. It had a flared magwell for faster reloads, a stippled grip that felt like sandpaper against the skin, and a Trijicon RMR Type 2 red dot sight mounted on top. I checked the chamber. Clear. I racked the slide, feeling the smooth, glass-like action. The trigger pull was tuned to a crisp 2.5 pounds, a hair trigger. Next to it, I grabbed my ear protection. Jackson had told me to bring earplugs, probably envisioning those cheap orange foam things you buy at Home Depot. Instead, I pulled out my Peltor Comtac Vive headset. These weren't just earmuffs. They were active hearing protection with 360-degree situational awareness microphones. They amplified quiet sounds like footsteps or whispers while instantly suppressing gunshot noise. I packed them into a nondescript gym bag, along with a stiff competition belt and a Kydex holster. I wasn't packing for a fun day out. I wasn't packing to learn. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the Glock. The weight of it was comforting. Tomorrow, Jackson was going to stand there with his beer belly and his internet knowledge, trying to lecture me on stance and grip. He was going to try to belittle me in front of his friends to boost his own fragile ego. He expected all of the supply clerk. He expected flinching. He expected fear. I looked at the gold barrel of my gun, gleaming under the room light. "School is in session, big brother," I whispered. I checked the magazine one last time, loading it with match-grade 147-grain ammunition. Subsonic, quiet, accurate. Tomorrow, the worlds were going to collide, and only one of us was walking away with our dignity intact. At 0900 hours sharp, a horn blared outside my apartment complex like a freight train announcing its arrival. I looked out the window. Jackson's black Chevy Silverado was idling at the curb, taking up 2 parking spaces. The exhaust rumbled with an aftermarket aggressiveness that screamed, "Look at me!" I grabbed my gym bag, the one containing my custom Glock and specialized headset, and walked out. I was wearing standard athletic gear, gray Under Armour leggings, a black hoodie, and Salomon trail running shoes. Practical, comfortable. Jackson leaned out the window as I approached. He was wearing wraparound Oakleys and a tactical vest that looked brand new, with the tags probably just cut off. "Morning, sunshine," he yelled over the engine noise. He looked me up and down as I climbed into the passenger seat. The interior smelled of new car scent spray and stale McDonald's. "Is that what you're wearing?" he asked, grimacing as if I'd shown up in a ball gown. "You look soft. I told you, shooting isn't yoga. You need sturdy clothes." "I'm comfortable, Jackson," I said, placing my bag carefully on the floorboard between my feet. "Let's just go." He revved the engine unnecessarily before peeling out of the lot, cutting off a Honda Civic in the process. He didn't even check his blind spot. For the next 45 minutes, I was held captive in the cab of his truck, forced to listen to a lecture that was equal parts hilarious and infuriating. The radio was blasting some generic bro-country song about dirt roads and cold beer, but Jackson turned it down just enough so I could hear his wisdom. "So, here's the thing about ballistics, Olive," he began, one hand on the wheel, the other gesturing wildly. "You gotta understand stopping power. That's why I carry a .45, because if I hit a bad guy, I want him to stay down. The 9mm rounds the military uses, basically BB guns, they just poke holes. A .45 takes a soul." I stared out the window at the passing pine trees of North Carolina. "Incorrect," my brain corrected automatically. Modern 9mm ballistics with hollow point technology offers similar expansion and penetration to a .45, with higher capacity and less recoil. That's why the FBI and SOCOM switched back. But I said nothing, I just nodded. "Is that right?" "Oh yeah, big time," Jackson nodded sagely. And then there's situational awareness. That's key. You gotta have your head on a swivel. Be ready for anything. Most people, especially civilians like you, walk around with their heads in the clouds. As he said this, his phone dinged in the cup holder. He immediately looked down, picked it up, and started typing a text message with both thumbs while steering with his knee. We were doing 70 miles per hour on the highway. "Jackson, watch the road," I said, my hand instinctively gripping the door handle. "Relax, I got it," he scoffed, not looking up. "I'm a multitasker." That's part of the warrior mindset. You have to process information rapidly. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. This man, who was currently endangering us both to text a buddy about fantasy football, was lecturing me on the warrior mindset. Me, a woman who had tracked targets through crowded bazaars in Aleppo without breaking cover. A woman who had called in airstrikes while taking suppressive fire. "You know," Jackson said, finally putting the phone down and swerving back into his lane. "I know you work in logistics, Olive, and that's fine. Someone has to count the beans. But honestly, it worries me." "What does?" "You, being a woman living alone, working a desk job, you're soft targets. Women in offices, you guys panic easily. It's biological, loud noises, stress. You freeze up. That's why I wanted to bring you out today. To inoculate you a bit, give you a taste of what it feels like to hold real power in your hands." My grip on the seatbelt tightened until my knuckles turned white. The insult was so casual, so ingrained in his worldview, that he didn't even realize he was insulting me. To him, it was just a fact. I was female, therefore I was fragile. I was logistics, therefore I was useless. "I appreciate your concern, Jackson," I said, my voice dangerously low, "but I think I handle stress better than you think." He laughed, a loud barking sound. "Ollie, come on. Remember when you were 10 and cried because you scraped your knee? It's okay. Men are built to protect. Women are built to nurture. I just want you to be able to defend yourself if, God forbid, a bad guy breaks into your apartment while you're watching The Bachelor." I turned my head fully away from him, staring at the blurred landscape. The rage was building in my chest, a hot, dense pressure. It wasn't just anger, it was a profound sense of injustice. I had killed men who tried to kill my team. I had held the hands of dying soldiers. I had endured things that would make Jackson curl into a fetal position and cry for his mother. And here I was, being treated like a child. "Almost there," Jackson announced as he turned onto a gravel road. A sign read, "Patriot Gun Club, members only." The sound of gunfire grew louder as we approached. Pop, pop, boom. It was the sound of my office, the sound of my life. But to Jackson, it was the sound of a playground. We pulled into the parking lot. It was filled with trucks just like Jackson's. Men in tactical pants and tight t-shirts were standing around, drinking energy drinks and comparing gear. It was a sea of testosterone and insecurity. Jackson parked and killed the engine. He turned to me, a benevolent smile on his face. "All right, sis. Welcome to the big leagues. Just stay close to me. Don't touch anything unless I say so, and try not to flinch too much. The boys are gonna love meeting you. Just try not to embarrass me, okay?" I unbuckled my seatbelt. The click was sharp and final. "I'll do my best," I said. I grabbed my bag. Inside, the custom Glock waited. The time for talking was over. The time for show and tell was about to begin. And Jackson had no idea he was the show and I was the tell. The range was a cacophony of gunfire and male posturing. We were assigned lane 4, right in the middle of a group of Jackson's buddies. They were all cut from the same cloth, middle-aged, overweight, wearing expensive tactical gear that looked like it had just come out of the packaging. "Hey, fellas," Jackson boomed, puffing out his chest. "Look who I dragged out of the warehouse, my little sister Olive. She's gonna learn how the big boys play today." A chorus of chuckles and "Hey, sweetie," greeted me. I gave a tight, polite nod and set my bag down on the bench behind the firing line. I kept it zipped. Not yet. "All right, watch and learn," Jackson said, stepping up to the line. He pulled his prized custom Glock 19 from its holster with a dramatic flourish that would have gotten him reprimanded by any legitimate range safety officer. He racked the slide. The target was set at 7 yards. 7? That's 21 feet. In my world, that's bad breath distance. You could practically throw the gun and hit the target from there. Jackson took his stance. It was painful to watch. He stood with his feet parallel, shoulder width apart, and leaned way back, as if the gun were going to push him over. He gripped the pistol with a teacup hold, his left hand cupping the bottom of the magazine well like he was sipping Earl Grey at a garden party. It was a technique that had been obsolete since the 1980s because it offered zero recoil control. "Going hot," he yelled unnecessarily loud. Bang, 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 bang. He fired 5 rounds in rapid succession, or rather, he tried to. He was jerking the trigger so hard I could see the muzzle dip before every shot. The recoil sent the gun flying up almost 90 degrees after each discharge because he had no leverage on the weapon. "Clear," he shouted, placing the gun on the table and turning to us with a grin that threatened to split his face. He was sweating already. "Did you see that?" he panted, wiping his forehead. "Kick is like a mule, but you gotta dominate it. Like David Goggins says, who's gonna carry the boats? You gotta stay hard, right? Embrace the suck." I looked downrange. The target, a standard silhouette, had 3 holes in the white paper, way off to the left in the shoulder area. 2 rounds had missed the paper entirely, at 7 yards. "Nice grouping, Jack," one of his buddies lied. "You really tore him up." "Yeah, well," Jackson shrugged, feigning modesty. "I was rushing it a bit, but that's combat shooting. You don't have time to aim when the adrenaline is pumping." I bit my tongue so hard I thought I might need stitches. Adrenaline? He was shooting at a piece of paper that wasn't shooting back. "All right, Olive," Jackson said, clapping his hands together. "Your turn. Come on up." I stepped forward. I reached for the gun, but Jackson intercepted me. "Whoa, whoa, let me set you up first," he said. He moved behind me, standing so close I could smell the stale coffee on his breath and the Old Spice deodorant masking his sweat. He reached around, grabbing my arms and physically maneuvering them. My skin crawled. Every instinct in my body screamed threat, neutralize, create distance. But I forced myself to stand rigid. "Okay, feet like this," he said, kicking my heels together. "Now, lean back a little. It counteracts the weight." He was setting me up to fall over. "Now, the grip," he continued, placing my hands in the same ineffective teacup hold he had used. "Don't squeeze too hard, you'll shake. Just cradle it." "Jackson," I said, my voice tight. "I think I—" "Shh, listen to the expert," he interrupted, his breath hot on my ear. "Now, here's the secret sauce. When you're ready to shoot, I want you to take a deep breath and hold it. Don't breathe. If you breathe, you miss. You gotta turn blue, okay?" Incorrect. In tactical shooting, you breathe naturally to keep your heart rate down and your vision clear. Holding your breath increases blood pressure and induces tremors. He was literally teaching me how to miss. "Got it?" he asked, finally stepping back, to my immense relief. "Got it," I lied. He picked up the gun, inserted a fresh magazine, and racked the slide. He held it out to me, handle first, with a look of extreme skepticism. "Grip it tight, but not too tight," he instructed for the 10th time. "And hey, just try to hit the paper, okay? Anywhere on the paper counts as a win for you. Don't worry about the bullseye. That's for the pros." He looked over at his friends, winking. "And don't cry if it scares you. It's loud." I took the gun. My hand wrapped around the polymer grip. It felt alien compared to my custom STI, but a Glock was a Glock. It was a tool. And in the hands of a master, any tool could sing. I looked at the target, 7 yards. It looked like a barn door from here. I looked at Jackson. He was smirking, arms crossed over his chest, waiting for the recoil to knock me backward, waiting for me to squeal and drop the gun so he could swoop in and save me. He wanted his validation. He wanted to be the big, strong protector teaching the helpless little sister. I felt a cold calm wash over me. The noise of the range faded into a dull hum, My heart rate dropped. My vision sharpened. I wasn't going to hit the paper. I was going to erase his ego. "Ready when you are, sis," Jackson called out. "Just don't shoot yourself." I turned my back to him, facing downrange. The mask was slipping. The supply clerk was checking out. The Green Beret was clocking in. "Stand by," I whispered to myself. "$20 says she drops it after the first shot," one of Jackson's friends whispered. It was loud enough for me to hear. It was meant for me to hear. "No way," another chuckled, the sound grating against my eardrums like sandpaper. $10 says she hits the dirt, or cries, or both." Jackson laughed along with them, a booming, confident sound that filled the small space of the firing lane. "Hey now, go easy on her, boys. She's used to counting boxes, not handling firepower. Just give her space to panic." I stood there, the Glock heavy in my hand, staring at the white paper target 7 yards away. The laughter behind me began to blend with other sounds in my head. Still counting underwear in the warehouse? My mother's voice, dripping with disappointment over the Thanksgiving turkey. "When are you going to get a real job?" "You walk like a man, Olive." Women in offices panic easily. It was a cacophony of doubt, a symphony of disrespect that had played on loop for the last decade of my life. I had swallowed it. I'd internalized it. I'd let them paint me as the failure so they could feel like the successes. But today the music stopped. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I wasn't in North Carolina. I wasn't Jackson's little sister. I was back in the stack, waiting to breach a door in Raqqa. I was in the hide site, regulating my breathing as a patrol walked by 10 feet away. I inhaled slowly through my nose, counting to 4. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. I held it. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. I exhaled, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Tactical breathing. My heart rate, which had spiked from irritation, began to slow. Thump, 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 60 beats per minute. The supply sergeant mask cracked. It fell away, shattering on the concrete floor, invisible to everyone but me. When I opened my eyes, the world looked different. The colors were sharper. The sounds of the range, the distant pops, the laughter, faded into background white noise. My focus narrowed to a tunnel vision centered entirely on the threat. In this case, the threat wasn't the target. The threat was the disrespect standing behind me. Jackson stepped forward again, his hand reaching out to correct my shoulder one more time. He was going to touch me. He was going to invade my space again to show his dominance. "Here, let me just fix your..." My left hand came off the gun and shot backward, catching his wrist in midair. I didn't squeeze hard, just enough to stop his momentum cold. "Don't," I said. The word hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. It wasn't the voice of Olive the sister. It was the voice of Captain Fulton. It was the voice that gave orders to men who killed for a living. It was cold, flat, and absolutely terrifying. Jackson froze. He looked down at my hand on his wrist, then up at my face. He saw something in my eyes he had never seen before. He didn't see the shy, awkward girl who brought potato salad to potlucks. He saw a predator. He saw the 1,000-yard stare. That hollow, detached look of someone who has seen the soul leave a body and didn't blink. "Back off, Jackson," I said, my voice dropping an octave. Quiet, but cutting through the noise like a razor blade. "You are standing in my workspace. Back off." It was a command, not a request. Jackson blinked, confused. His lizard brain, the primal part of the mind that recognizes danger before the conscious mind can process it, took over. He took 2 stumbling steps backward, his hands raising slightly in a defensive gesture he didn't even realize he was making. "Whoa," he stammered, his confident smirk dissolving into uncertainty. Okay, just trying to help, geez. PMS much?" He tried to laugh it off, looking at his friends for support. But the laughter died in their throats. They felt it too. The shift in atmospheric pressure. The air around me felt charged, dangerous. I turned my attention back to the target. I didn't lean back like a scared girl. I didn't use the teacup grip. I stepped forward with my left foot, widening my stance to shoulder width. I bent my knees slightly, lowering my center of gravity, grounding myself like a tree root. This was the modern isosceles stance: aggressive, stable, mobile. I leaned my torso forward, engaging my core, preparing to absorb the recoil not as a shock, but as a rhythm. I brought the gun up. My grip shifted seamlessly, my strong hand high on the backstrap, getting as close to the bore axis as possible. My support hand wrapped around the front, fingers digging in, thumbs forward and parallel, creating a vice-like clamp on the weapon. I extended my arms, locking my elbows, but keeping them unlocked enough to act as shock absorbers. My head dipped slightly, bringing my dominant eye in line with the sights without straining my neck. General James Mattis's words echoed in the silence of my mind. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everyone you meet. I had been polite. I had been professional. Now, I had a plan. The target was 7 yards away. It was an insultingly easy shot. But I wasn't just going to shoot it. I was going to surgically dismantle it. The chatter behind me had stopped completely. Even the guys in the next lane had paused to watch. There was something magnetic about competence. You could feel it when someone knew exactly what they were doing. My finger moved from the frame to the trigger. I took up the slack, feeling the wall. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is messy. Anger makes you miss. I was cold. I was precise. I was a machine built by the United States government to do one thing very, very well. I focused on the front sight post. Crystal clear. The target blurred slightly in the background. Breath out. Pause. The moment I pull this trigger, everything changes. My cover is blown. My family will know, but I can't go back. I won't go back. If you are ready to see Jackson's ego explode into a million pieces, smash that like button right now. And tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you are absolutely best at that nobody gives you credit for? I want to know your secret superpower. The world narrowed down to a single point of impact. Squeeze. My finger compressed the trigger. The break was crisp, like snapping a glass rod. Bang! The gun recoiled, the slide cycling back and forth in a blur of motion faster than the human eye could track. But unlike Jackson's flailing attempt, my muzzle didn't climb to the sky. My grip, locked in that vice-like isosceles structure, absorbed the energy, channeling it through my arms, down my spine, and into the earth. The sights lifted slightly and snapped right back down onto the target. A perfect return to zero. I didn't stop. Bang, 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 bang. 4 more shots followed the first in a rhythm so fast it sounded like a single, long tear in the fabric of reality. The cadence was precise. Pop, 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 pop. Split times of 0.18 seconds between shots. Brass casings ejected in a graceful arc to my right, tinkling as they hit the concrete floor. The smell of burnt cordite filled the air, perfume to my nostrils. And then, silence. The echo of the shots rolled away over the berms. I didn't lower the gun immediately. I held the follow through, keeping my sights on the target, resetting the trigger, waiting to see if the threat was neutralized. It was muscle memory drilled into me by thousands of hours on the flat range and in kill houses. Once satisfied, I broke my stance. Smoothly, without wasted movement, I pressed the magazine release. The empty mag dropped freely onto the table. I racked the slide back, locking it open, and visually inspected the chamber. Clear. I placed the Glock on the bench, slide locked back, ejection port facing up, muzzle pointing downrange. Safe. The entire sequence, from the first shot to the gun hitting the table, had taken maybe 3 seconds. I exhaled a long breath, letting the tension drain out of my shoulders. I stood straight and turned to look at Jackson. He was standing there with his mouth slightly open, like a fish gasping for air. His friends were frozen, beers halfway to their mouths, eyes wide. The confident smirks were gone, wiped clean by the sheer violence of action they had just witnessed. "Pull it in," I said softly. Jackson blinked, shaking himself out of his stupor. He fumbled for the switch on the lane control. The electric motor whirred to life, bringing the target carrier back from 7 yards. As the paper slid closer, the confusion on Jackson's face deepened. You missed, he stammered, squinting at the target. Olive, you missed 4 of them. He was looking at the paper. At 7 yards usually, you see 5 distinct holes. But on my target, there was only 1 hole. It was dead center in the X ring, the absolute bullseye. It was slightly larger than a normal bullet hole, ragged around the edges. Bring it all the way in, I said. The target stopped 2 feet in front of us. Jackson leaned in, his nose almost touching the paper. No way, one of his buddies whispered behind me. Jackson traced the hole with his finger. It wasn't 1 hole, it was 5 holes stacked directly on top of each other. It was a ragged hole, the hallmark of a grandmaster shooter. At that speed, at that distance, putting 5 rounds through the same tear in the paper was a feat of mechanical precision that most people only saw in movies. That's impossible, Jackson muttered. He looked at the gun on the table, then back at me, as if trying to reconcile the weapon with the sister he thought he knew. It's a fluke. The gun. Maybe the sights are off. He was grasping at straws, his brain refusing to accept the reality that his logistics sister had just outshot him by an order of magnitude. I reached up and pulled off my electronic ear protection, letting it hang around my neck. The silence in the bay was deafening. Every eye in the vicinity was on us. I walked over to Jackson, invading his space this time. I didn't touch him. I didn't have to. The air around me was enough to make him shrink. The sights are fine, Jackson, I said, my voice calm, devoid of the earlier anger. It was the calm of someone who knows exactly who they are. And the recoil? It's just physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. If you have a proper grip, it manages itself. I leaned in closer, ensuring he heard every syllable. And one more thing. Don't ever tell a soldier to hold their breath. Oxygen fuels the brain. It keeps your vision sharp and your muscles relaxed. Holding your breath increases your heart rate and makes you shake. In a firefight, that's the fastest way to die. I picked up the target sheet, ripping it off the cardboard backer. I folded it neatly and tucked it into his tactical vest pocket, right next to his pristine, unused tourniquet. You can keep that, I said, as a souvenir. I turned back to the bench to pack up my gear. My hands were steady, my heart was light. For the first time in 10 years, I felt seen. Not by them, they were still too in shock to truly see, but by myself. I had let the wolf out, and she had hunted. Behind me, nobody said a word. The mansplaining was over. The lesson had been delivered. And the teacher was dismissed. The silence was broken by the sound of slow, heavy footsteps crunching on the gravel. A shadow fell over our bench. I turned to see an older man approaching. He was in his 60s, with skin like weathered leather and a thick gray mustache. He wore a faded flannel shirt and a baseball cap that had seen better days. On the front of the cap, barely visible through the grease stains, was a small embroidered triangle, the unit insignia of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. It was Gary Y., the owner of the Patriot Gun Club, a local legend in Fayetteville. Rumor had it he was on the ground in Mogadishu in '93. Jackson's face lit up. This was his hero. He straightened his posture, puffing out his chest, desperate to associate himself with Gary's grit. "Gary!" Jackson called out, extending his hand, a wide, ingratiating smile plastered on his face. "Good to see you, sir. I was just showing my sister the ropes. You know how it is, teaching the rookies." Gary didn't even blink. He walked right past Jackson's outstretched hand as if my brother were a ghost. He didn't look at him. He didn't acknowledge him. Gary walked straight up to me. He stopped 2 feet away, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. He looked at my stance, which I had relaxed but not abandoned. He looked at the custom Glock on the table, and then he looked at the target with the single, ragged hole in the center. He reached out and picked up the target I had tucked into Jackson's vest. He held it up to the light, examining the grouping. He let out a low whistle. Then he looked me in the eye. His gaze was intense, piercing. The look of a man who could spot a fake from a mile away. "That's a hell of a bill drill," Gary said, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He nodded slowly, glancing at my hands. You handle that weapon like it's an extension of your arm. Not a lot of folks around here hold a gun like that. Teacup grip seems to be the flavor of the month for the tactical crowd. He threw a shade at Jackson without even looking at him. Gary leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only I and the now very quiet Jackson could hear. You out at the compound? He asked. It was a coded question. The compound referred to the highly classified headquarters of JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. It wasn't something civilians knew about. I met his gaze. Team 7 just got back from the sandbox. Gary's eyes crinkled at the corners. He looked down at his left hand. The ring finger was missing, a stump of scar tissue where a digit used to be. A souvenir from a breaching charge gone wrong in Panama, or so the stories went. He tapped the table with his remaining fingers. Welcome home, he said. It was the most sincere thing anyone had said to me in weeks. Thanks, Gary. Finally, Gary turned his attention to Jackson. My brother was standing there, pale, his mouth slightly agape, looking back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis match played in a foreign language. You know this girl, Jackson? Gary asked, hooking a thumb in my direction. Yeah, she's my sister, Jackson stammered. Olive, she works in logistics, at the warehouse. Gary laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a dry, barking sound. Logistics, Gary repeated, shaking his head. Son, let me tell you something. I've been running this range for 20 years. I've seen Delta operators, Green Berets, SEALs, and FBI HRT come through here. And I've seen a lot of posers. He took a step toward Jackson, invading his space just like Jackson had invaded mine. Jackson shrank back, looking suddenly very small in his expensive tactical vest. You were just trying to teach a Special Forces team leader how to shoot, Gary said, his voice dripping with disdain. Did you know that? Did you know your sister is probably one of the deadliest human beings within a 100-mile radius? Jackson's eyes bulged. What? No. She counts underwear. She counts bodies, son, Gary corrected him, his face hard. I watched her run that drill. That's not a hobby, that's a trade. She could kill everyone standing on this firing line with a pencil before you could even get your safety off. The color drained from Jackson's face completely. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. He saw the scars. He saw the stillness. He saw the lethal competence that Gary had just validated. His entire worldview, the alpha male fantasy, the belief in his own superiority, the condescension toward his weak sister, crumbled in an instant. Jackson started, but no words came out. He looked at his friends. They were looking at their shoes, suddenly finding the gravel very interesting. Gary turned back to me and tipped the brim of his hat. Range is yours, Captain, he said respectfully. Let me know if you need anything. Ammo's on the house today. Appreciate it, Gary, I said. Gary walked away, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush Jackson's truck. I picked up my gym bag and slung it over my shoulder. I didn't need to say anything else. Gary had said it all. Let's go, Jackson, I said, walking past him toward the truck. I think we're done here. Jackson followed me like a whipped dog. He didn't offer to carry my bag. He didn't make a joke. He just walked, head down, the weight of his own humiliation pressing down on his shoulders. The drive home was going to be very, very quiet. The drive back to Fayetteville was suffocating. Jackson didn't turn on the radio. He didn't text. He drove with both hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, staring straight ahead at the asphalt. The silence in the cab of the truck was heavy, thick with unspoken words and shattered ego. For the first 20 minutes, the only sound was the hum of the tires and the rhythmic thrum of the engine. I sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window, watching the pine trees blur past. I wasn't angry anymore. I felt lighter, as if I had just shed a 50-pound rucksack I'd been carrying for a decade. Finally, Jackson cleared his throat. It was a nervous, raspy sound. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. His voice lacked its usual booming confidence. It sounded small. Why did you let me make a fool of myself back there? You let me lecture you. You let me look like an idiot in front of Gary, in front of my friends. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening. He was trying to shift the blame, trying to make himself the victim. Typical. I turned my head slowly to look at him. Because you never asked, Jackson, I said calmly. He frowned, glancing at me for a split second before returning his eyes to the road. What do you mean I never asked? We talk all the time. No, I corrected him. You talk, I listen. In 10 years, have you ever once asked me, Olive, what do you actually do? Have you ever asked, Olive, are you okay? No, you just assumed. You assumed I was counting socks because that fit the narrative you wanted. Narrative? He scoffed, though the fight was draining out of him. What narrative? The one where you're the big, strong, successful brother, and I'm the spinster sister who failed at life, I said, my voice steady and cold. You and Mom. You need me to be small. You need me to be the logistics girl so you can feel big. If I'm weak, then you're strong by comparison. If I'm poor, then you're rich. Jackson opened his mouth to argue, but closed it again. The truth of my words hit him like a physical blow. He knew it. Deep down, under layers of insecurity and bravado, he knew I was right. I didn't think. He trailed off. Exactly, I said. You didn't think. You just judged. I shifted in my seat, turning my body fully toward him. This was it. The moment I set the terms of engagement for the rest of our lives. Listen to me carefully, Jackson, I said. Because I'm only going to say this once. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. From this moment on, Olive the supply sergeant is dead. She doesn't exist anymore. The woman sitting next to you is a Green Beret team leader. I have done things you can't even imagine. I have seen things that would give you nightmares for the rest of your life. I paused, letting the weight of my identity sink in. I don't need your protection, I continued. I don't need your money. And I certainly don't need your lessons on how to be tough. I have more money in my savings account than your entire construction company is worth. I could buy this truck and your house in cash today. Jackson's eyes widened. You do? Yes, I said. But I don't flash it around because I don't need to prove anything. That's the difference between us, Jackson. You need everyone to know you're an alpha. I just am what I am. I took a deep breath. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control the actions of others, only our reactions to them. I had reacted with silence for too long. Now, I was reacting with boundaries. Here is the new deal, I said, my tone final. You will treat me with respect. You will stop the mansplaining. You will stop the little digs about my job or my marital status. You will tell Mom to back off. And if I don't? Jackson asked, a flicker of his old defiance trying to spark. Then I disappear, I said simply. I'm serious, Jackson. I will request a transfer to Fort Lewis or Germany. I will change my number. I will block you on everything. You will never see me or hear from me again. I don't need this family. I have a family. They wear multicam and they would die for me. I choose to be here because I love you, despite everything. But I won't be a doormat anymore. The truck cab fell silent again. The threat hung in the air, tangible and real. Jackson knew I wasn't bluffing. He had seen the 1,000-yard stare at the range. He knew I had the capacity to cut ties as surgically as I'd cut the center out of that target. He drove for another mile, processing everything. I watched his face. I saw the struggle, the death of his ego, the birth of a new realization. He looked at me again, and this time, there was no condescension. There was fear. And behind the fear, there was something else. Respect. Okay, he said quietly. His voice was humble, stripped of all its bluster. Okay, Olive, I hear you. Good, I said. I didn't know, he added, his voice cracking slightly. About the money, about everything. I'm sorry. It was the first time in my adult life that my brother had apologized to me. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't fix everything overnight. But it was a start. I looked back out the window. The sun was dipping below the tree line, casting long shadows across the road. The war inside my house wasn't over, but the terms of the treaty had just been rewritten. And for the first time, I was the one holding the pen. "Just drive, Jackson," I said, leaning back in the seat, "and turn the radio back on. But no more Florida Georgia Line. Put on some classic rock." Jackson let out a small, nervous chuckle. He reached out and turned the dial. The opening chords of AC/DC's Thunderstruck filled the cabin. He didn't say another word. He just drove, 2 hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, sitting next to a sister he was only just beginning to meet. 1 month later, the scent of charcoal and grilling burgers filled the air in my mother's backyard. It was a crisp December afternoon in Fayetteville, the kind where the sun is bright but the air has a bite to it, perfect for a hoodie and a cold beer. I sat at the picnic table, watching the smoke drift up towards the Carolina blue sky. A month ago, sitting here would have felt like sitting in a dentist's waiting room, tense, painful, waiting for the drill. But today, the air felt different. Lighter. "Olive, honey," my mother called out from the patio door, holding a tray of potato salad. "Do you want cheese on your burger? Jackson's about to pull them off." "Yes, please, Mom. Cheddar if we have it," I called back. "Coming right up," she smiled. It was a genuine smile. She didn't ask about the warehouse. She didn't make a passive-aggressive comment about my lack of a husband. She just asked about cheese. It was a small thing, but to me, it was a ceasefire. I looked over at the grill. Jackson was manning the tongs, wearing an apron that said, "Grill Sergeant." A month ago, I would have rolled my eyes at the irony. Today, I just took a sip of my Miller Lite and watched him work. He wasn't wearing his tactical vest. He wasn't wearing the Milan Lab shirt. He was just wearing a flannel and jeans. He looked up and caught my eye. "Hey, Olive," he waved the tongs. "Quick question. I was looking at optics online last night. For a home defense setup, would you recommend a red dot or one of those LPVO scopes? I see a lot of guys running the scopes now." He didn't say it with arrogance. He didn't tell me what was better. He asked. He was consulting the expert. I walked over, leaning against the railing. "For home defense, stick with the red dot, Jackson. An LPVO adds weight and complexity you don't need in a hallway. Keep it simple. Speed kills." He nodded thoughtfully, flipping a patty. "Makes sense. Keep it simple. Thanks, sis." "Anytime." Just then, the gate to the backyard swung open, and 2 of Jackson's friends from the gun club walked in, carrying a cooler. They froze for a second when they saw me, a look of recognition and slight apprehension crossing their faces. Jackson didn't miss a beat. He slapped one of them on the back. "Hey guys, come grab a beer," he said. Then he pointed at me with the tongs. "You remember my sister, Olive? Yeah, be nice. She's the real deal. Seriously, don't make any bets with her unless you want to lose your paycheck." The guys laughed, a little nervously, and nodded at me with genuine respect. "Good to see you again, Olive," one of them said. "That was, some shooting last month." "Good to see you too, Mike," I smiled. I walked back to the table and sat down. It wasn't just that Jackson had stopped the insults. It was that he had started to take pride in who I actually was, not who he pretended I was. The dynamic had shifted. The hierarchy of big brother, little sister had been replaced by civilian brother, warrior sister. And he seemed okay with that. Something tugged at my sleeve. I looked down. It was my nephew, Leo, Jackson's 8-year-old son. He was holding a plastic toy soldier, one of those little green army men. "Aunt Olive?" he asked, his big brown eyes wide. "What's up, buddy?" "Dad said you're a soldier. Like, a real one. Like Captain America, but without the shield." I chuckled. "Something like that, but I don't wear a cape." "He said you're super strong," Leo continued, looking at my arms. "I want to be strong too. When I grow up, I want to be tough like you and Dad." I looked at Jackson. He was watching us from the grill, a soft expression on his face. He wasn't teaching his son that women were weak anymore. He wasn't passing down the toxic insecurity that had plagued our relationship for decades. The cycle was breaking. Right here, right now, over burgers and potato salad. I knelt down so I was eye level with Leo. "You know, Leo," I said softly, tapping his temple with my finger. Being tough isn't about big muscles or loud trucks, and it's definitely not about being mean to people. It's not, he asked, confused. No, I shook my head. Real strength starts in here. It's about being calm when everyone else is scared. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. And it's about knowing who you are, even if nobody else does. Leo nodded slowly, absorbing the words with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can muster. Okay, I'll remember that. Good man, I ruffled his hair. Now go get a hot dog before your dad burns them. He ran off laughing. I stood up, feeling a lump in my throat. That was the legacy. Not the medals in my drawer, not the money in my bank account, not even the terrorists I had removed from the battlefield. It was this. It was teaching a little boy that strength comes in all forms, and that respect is the currency of a real man. I grabbed my beer and walked around to the front of the house. I needed a moment of quiet to soak it all in. I sat on the old wooden rocking chair on the porch. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. Across the street, a neighbor was raking leaves. A dog barked in the distance. Attached to the pillar of the porch, the American flag snapped gently in the breeze. Old Glory. I had fought under that flag in deserts and mountains, in places where the sand turned to glass and the nights were freezing cold. I had lost friends under that flag. For so long, I felt like I had to leave that part of me at the door when I came home. I felt like I had to put on a costume, the spinster, the clerk, the disappointment, just to fit into the picture my family had painted. But the costume was gone now. Burned away by 5 rounds of 9mm ammunition and a moment of courage. I took a long sip of the cold beer. It tasted like victory. Not the loud ticker tape parade kind of victory, but the quiet, enduring kind. The kind that settles in your bones and lets you sleep at night without nightmares. I was Olive Fulton. I was a daughter, a sister, an aunt, and I was a Green Beret. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to choose between them. I leaned back, closing my eyes, listening to the laughter drifting from the backyard. I was home. Truly home. And finally, I was seen. Thank you for walking this path with me. My story isn't just about guns or ranks. It's about the battles we fight in our own living rooms, struggling to be seen by the people we love. If you've ever felt like the black sheep or had to hide your true strength to keep the peace, know that you are not alone. Your value isn't defined by their approval. If Olive's journey resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this story. It helps more than you know. And remember, stay silent, stay professional, but never ever let them forget who you really are. See you in the next one.